फिर से करो. In every heartbeat of life, there's a story.
That's the beautiful thing about life, is that everything is very fluid and dynamic, and this is the dance between who you want to be, what you need to do, and it ebbs and flows on a day-to-day basis.
With each shared experience, there is an invitation to each one of you to introspect, to question. How does this resonate with me?
People who are already enlightened, people who are living that path, you take their association, you mimic that behavior in some shape and form.
Join us as we dive into tales that feel written from the pages of our own lives.
In the Hare Krishna temple, we used to always say, take the association of enlightened devotees.
Reflect on each narrative and ponder how these tales mirror your own journey. Because in every shared story, there's a spark waiting to ignite your own path of personal transformation. This is Saujanya, your host, welcoming you to our new series, The Change Catalyst from Attitude Makeover. Before we even get to the larger topic of self leadership through adversity, like I told you earlier, I was very intrigued by your monkhood journey at 23. Um, and here's what the intriguing part for me is, it's not necessarily the monkhood journey. I mean, that is very cool and interesting. More than cool, it's interesting and it's a game changer for an individual. But at 23, you're sort of going through a reboot in life. You finished your college years, you're stepping out into the world. Everybody's aspirations are led with parents' aspirations. You're coming from an Indian background, so I would think your parents had a different aspiration. To go against that into monkhood wouldn't have been easy, and there must have been, some bit of a flux you went through. And for 4 years, I was totally intrigued by that. Can you tell me a little bit about how did that come into being? What were some things that you had to, you know,
Yeah.
face
No, thank
in
you.
order to go through that?
Thank you so much for starting there. Firstly, yes, it was a little bit difficult, and I would be doing a grave injustice by telling you it was all planned. Nothing was planned. I grew up wanting to play sport, wanting to play cricket for the country. I didn't understand and fully grapple with the impact of the apartheid on a person of color. Because I grew up in an Indian community, and we played in certain teams, and what I didn't realize was that everybody in my team were people of color. So it was only when the ecosystem expanded and I went to sort of national level that I started to see, okay, we're playing from white privileged schools, white privileged communities, and we're being treated differently. It's when I crossed over to 18 that I realized the opportunities are really, really and truly very, very restricted. And that was a really pivotal turning point for me. So, but remember, to get to that point at 18, there was a lot of conflict at home because my parents knew what I was up against. None of them played any professional sport. So they were pushing me. I come from a family of doctors and pharmacists. Most of my uncles and cousins have studied abroad. Everyone is in the medical field. We are traditionally a Gujarati family from India that were jewelers by say. So traditional businessmen that migrated into medicine over three generations. Sport was very alien to everyone. No one even knew how to support me. So there was a lot of friction in that.
Mm.
I decided to sort of run against that tide and pursue it. And when I hit that roadblock at 18, I didn't know where to turn because I'd already fought with everyone at home. And at 18 years old, you have no money, you have no
Mm.
car, you have no other home, you have nothing. The only other place that I knew where I could get a roof over my head was actually the temple because I grew up in a very, very spiritual home. My grandfather was a preacher. I grew up listening to the scriptures. Everything in our home was centered around the temple at home and the deities and the scriptures. It was a real sanctum of spirituality in terms of every single thing, how we communicated, the celebration, the type of food we ate, every single thing was around that. So that temple was a sanctum for me. It was the only place I went. I went in there for I didn't even plan to go in. Went to work in the morning, and in the afternoon, I decided to go to the temple, and it was late, so I stayed one night, and then I enjoyed it. I woke up early. did the prayers, and then I went to work again. And then one day became another, became another. And I told my parents I was staying there, and initially they were not really worried about it. It was only after about 2 weeks that I'd not gone home that they were asking me, "Hey, what's happening?" And so then I went home, picked up a little bit more clothes, but never stayed. Always stayed at the temple. And a couple of weeks became a month became 2 months, and then they became increasingly concerned. They became very. They sent a lot of people to the temple to talk to me. They felt, "Hey, you're not going to get married. We want you to do this. What are you doing?" All sorts of things like this were happening, but none of it was very, very aggressive in any shape and form. They was concerned, they would speak to me, but they were generally also very supportive in that, because they understood where I was going. It was not like I took a completely deviant path and I was into drugs or anything like that.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is, we look and we talk about the word monkhood right now. And when a parent listens to a monk, they draw so much of inspiration and strength from it, and there's so much of clarity. Someone comes into your home and reads the Bible as a pastor, or the Quran, or the Bhagavad Gita. You're very in awe of that person. But when
Yeah.
your own child wants to walk down that path, there's fear. And that was
Yeah.
the first dichotomy I realized in most Indian homes, is that, oh, we want to learn from these people, we don't want you to become that. and
Yeah.
and and you can understand the dichotomy between a spiritual existence and a physical existence. Everybody wants the tranquility of a spiritual existence, right? Which comes with all of that detachment and all of that zen, but they're also still very attached to the physical material world, where I need to get money, I need to proof of age, you need to get married, you need to do all of this. So that was the first dichotomy that really came in. It wasn't easy at all in dealing with it, but my family has been exceptionally supportive through those 4 years. And nobody told me to enter, and nobody told me to leave.
Mm.
After 4 years of being in the temple, I'm probably the only one who spent that much time and then left the temple. I don't know of
Wow.
another monk from this particular group or temple that left. Generally they're there for 20, 30 years. That becomes their life. But I had this calling that I wanted to do a little bit more. And
Mm.
what I wanted to do was get back onto that sports field. And this has happened to me at least a few times in my life, where I've taken a break from professional sport, and literally within 2 to 3 years, I'm back in it. You
Back
know,
in.
I'm back on the pitch, because there is something so invigorating and inspiring about being with your team in the heat of battle, crossing adversity in many shapes and form and rising above. And we saw that 4 years, I wanted to get back into that avenue. And that's what pushed me back in. So when I'm saying nothing was engineered, everything was seamless. How I entered, what I learned, who I found, the groundings that I found in there, and how I left, uh, was everything was seamless. Though it did play one pivotal part, was that from the moment I left, spirituality became the core pillar with which I coach and lead every single person, including myself.
Including. So it became like a compass for you.
It is the compass. So that's the thing, is, in the world of spirituality, we talk of the clock and the compass.
Mm.
The material world, or the world around you, will always measure you against the clock. So what are your markets? How much you're earning? How quick you're earning this? What is it? Everything is against time. Whereas spirituality is your compass. It's always pointing you in the direction of your heart, what you align with, what is true. And success in this world is a balance between the clock and the compass. The clock
Yeah.
alone will give you achievement, but not fulfillment. The compass alone will give you a sense of fulfillment on a completely different level. But if you want to really succeed in the material world, as we've seen in the Bhagavad Gita, everyone who took that battle lived in a physical, material world where they had roles and responsibilities. It is a battle between the heart and the head.
Yeah, no, I'm resonating with this in multiple ways. For me, hockey has been a grounding factor as a kid. Cycling continues to be that right now. Archery and shooting is another one that really helps me again to sort of center myself. So
Yeah.
sports is a beautiful life teacher in some ways. Finding the right coach or the person who can actually you can trust in and maneuver through this journey of this world and the worldly pleasures that we are part of, and discovering yourself. That's a struggle, finding that balance over there. I'm so glad you're actually talking about that, because that's a journey in itself, and it's not an easy journey, because you constantly have to ask yourself, hey, is this the heart or the brain? Where's it coming
Yes.
from, right? Yeah.
No,
Beautiful.
absolutely. You have to always have this dipstick
Yeah.
test of what are you feeling and when you're feeling it and how are you growing through. One of the interesting things that I actually tell, and I know our podcast is a lot around self-leadership. So I tell people, what will be really interesting is if everyone picks an incident from their life that was a hallmark moment, preferably a hallmark moment of pain. For me, it was the apartheid, you know, and that becomes my inflection point every 2 to 3 years, where how am I looking at that hallmark moment? And
Yeah.
as I've done this, I've been doing this exercise for more than 20 years right now, and I saw that transition from what was pure pain and anger to what was absolute rage and revenge to transitioning to acceptance, you know. And acceptance is a beautiful plateau, and only when you get to acceptance can you then start swinging up towards gratitude, where you're able to see that silver lining through your pain. So when I say find that hallmark moment in your life that you reflect on, that hallmark moment is a byproduct of your spiritual growth and evolution that you can test yourself on.
Yeah.
20 decades later or 2 decades later, 20 years later, if you're looking at the same instant with the same level of pain as you did 20 years ago, then there's questions to be asked around who you're surrounding yourself with, what are you doing, how you're reflecting, how has that superimposed or imposed on other aspects of your life. So an interesting thing from a self-leadership point of view is for everyone to find that hallmark moment in their life and keep reflecting on it year on year to see what your evolutionary growth is looking like.
Yeah, I wish I had known you 23 years back. I think I would have covered quite a bit of this journey. But I'm actually in that early years of exploration. To your point, 20 years later, I'm actually reflecting on what's that pivotal point and how has that
Yeah.
remained and sustained itself, and everything, right? Like your behaviors, how you react to this world, and the triggers, everything is very different when you actually aware, and then have a gratitude for the journey you've come this far with, and then comes the whole journey of rediscovering yourself. So thank you. I want to start off with first just an understanding of what is self leadership, because this morning I was talking to my daughter and I was telling her I'm going to sit having this conversation with you. So her simple question was, what is self leadership? And I also want you to talk about adversity in the same lines. What is adversity? Is it as big as a trauma that one has gone through, or is it smaller adversities like financial challenges, etc., etc.? What are the definitions for these two?
So, firstly, to start with, adversity is any sort of a difficult situation that you're dealing with. And when we describe and you look at adversity, there is no attributed time frame to it. So it doesn't mean that we call it adversity if it lasts a month or it lasts a year. There's no definition around, or there's no attributing or contributing factors with the degree of pain it needs to cause or the pillar it needs to be. Adversity could be a simple thing like for someone losing a limb in an accident, for someone becoming bankrupt, for someone losing a loved one, for someone losing a job. Adversity could even be I have a great job, I have a great family, but I have a person in my entire ecosystem who is perhaps my boss who belittles me in front of everyone else. So on the surface, everything is looking great. I have everything that I want to, but adversity is any challenge or any difficult situation that you need to overcome in some shape and form. Okay, so that's the definition of adversity. Self leadership is how do you understand the fabric of yourself? How do you understand the identity of yourself? What is your core values as such? And self leadership is the process of staying aligned with your core values as you try to transcend micro or macro adversities in your life.
Mm.
So to bring these two together, right? Leadership is what? Leadership is not what you do in accordance with everyone else and what the company tells you. Leadership is how do you stay aligned to who you are, to those heartstrings. And to do an exercise to find that out, we call that a core values exercise. So what are the value systems, the morals and ethics that you want to align with? Adversity and the challenges. So how are you using your moral compass, right, to transcend these adversities and still recognize who you are at the end of that journey? A lot of the times what adversity does is it forces you to take a path that is little tangential to your core values, and you get to the other side, you've overcome it, but you've lost every sense of who you are. Okay, so self-leadership is the process of not just overcoming adversity, but overcoming adversity in alignment with who you are and who you want to be at the end of that.
Can you give me an example of what are values in this? Like in an organization, these values could be an open door policy, we treat people with respect, etc., etc. As an individual, I don't think we often talk about what are values, core values we sort of, hold ourselves
Yeah.
close to. Can you give me an example
Yeah.
around?
Yeah, I think there's an exercise that I normally do which carries 6 questions. But for everyone listening, if we have to simplify this, let me ask you, and let's run this exercise between us for the next 30 seconds. I want you to answer this question in 2 sentences, maximum 3 sentences. Okay, I said the situation. You are in a room with 5 to 6 people who are made up of friends, who are made up of close work colleagues, right? And who may be made up with family members. Okay. Now, these 6 people are going to leave this room and they are going to go and meet someone they love very, very much.
Hmm.
Okay. So these 6 people are leaving this room and they're going to go and meet someone they love very much. And in that conversation with that person and the person they love, your name pops up. Okay. How would you like them to describe you?
Lovely.
Answer the question.
Oh, you want me to?
I want
Kind,
you
I
to answer
think.
the question.
I think kind, respectful, um, thoughtful.
Okay.
I think it's all revolving around kindness in some ways for me. I think, yeah.
So, kind, respectful, thoughtful, those are your core values. Now, the question of living in alignment with that is asking yourself every single day with every person you interact with, have I given them a reason to think I'm kind, I'm respectful, and I'm thoughtful?
Got it.
When you can do that and ask this question, not just with these 6 people, but with everyone you interact with every single day, then you're living in alignment with your heartstrings and you're moving towards your true north. This is the simplest, easiest version of determining core values and asking yourself how to live in alignment with it.
I have a question as a follow up here. One of the rules, I play poker a lot. One of the rules of poker is you fold when you're dealt with bad cards. In this particular scenario, as we're talking about it, um, if you're surrounded with not the right kind of people and you're holding these core values, do you exit or do you strive hard to make changes in that environment? What's the right way of going about?
So everything is very, very determined, and you know more than anyone knows. The worst hand in poker is 7 and 2. You
Yeah,
get a 7 and a 2. You can't do anything with that, but you can still win.
yeah,
You can still win because it's not what you're holding in your hand, it's how you project what you're holding in your hand, right?
true.
So very, very similarly, right, in your ecosystem, your environment is a byproduct of who you are, but what's more important is what you project that's in here to that ecosystem. you know you can only, if you don't come in with confidence, if you come in and you are tentative, and if someone raises the bet and then you could fold at the first hand, you're done. Because why? You've allowed the ecosystem to determine for you and to assess what you are. But if you
Mm.
bring a certain level of conviction and courage and confidence to that there, then the ecosystem sees it completely differently. And remember, everything in life is a dance of perspective. Everything. And that's what poker teaches you more than anything else.
Yeah.
Everything is perspective. What are you holding versus what are they thinking or what are they seeing you holding? How you play everything. It's a dance of power, a dance of it. So very, very similarly, they two schools of thought. The first school of thought is, what? it's good to throw in your cards, or good to give up whilst you're ahead. The question is, when do you determine when is ahead? You know,
Mm.
and the more important question is, have I done everything possible to 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 positively contribute to this ecosystem in some shape and form? Okay, which comes back to my very, very uh, first thing that I told you about, which is I said that you give from one hand, but you have to take from another hand. So you're taking from an ecosystem of mentors, you have to give to a group of people. So how do you know that you were not injected into this ecosystem that's not supporting you, because that was the ecosystem you were supposed to lift from? So if
Mm.
you go in with the taker's mindset, you'll eject. But you go in with the giver's mindset, you'll help them raise in some
Wow.
shape and form. So everything comes from perspective, and everything comes from aligning with your core values.
I think one interesting thing you're talking about here is also about that supporting mindset. Oftentimes, when we talk about change, it's more around the physiological change more than the psychological part of it. But here you're talking about having that mindset, that supportive mindset, the boundaries that you create, the giving mindset versus the taking
Mm.
mindset, expectations, and so on and so forth. How does one build this? Where does one start?
Yeah, mindset is everything. Every single thing in your life is mindset. You want to be rich, it's mindset. You want to lose weight, it's mindset. You want to fall in love, it's mindset. You want to get healthy, it's mindset. Every single thing is the mindset with which you approach that situation. And you know, in there's a beautiful book called Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, where he talks about the 5 states of mind. And
Mm.
Saint Patanjali beautifully explains it, that in the first 2 states of mind, right, you are directly proportional to the environment you're in. Which means if I put you in a toxic environment, your behavior will merge to that. If I put you in a positive environment, you will mirror that. So, these are the first two states in which you mirror everything. Okay, I think it could be called Sipta and Mudra, I think. The third state is called Ekagra. Ekagra is a very neutral state. Neutral state means you're aware of a higher existence than myself. So right now, you are going through this growth over 2 years where you realize, I'm not living in alignment with who I am. You're in that state of Ekagra.
Mm.
Ekagra means that I know where I am, but I'm also aware that there's a state of bliss higher than who I am. The
Yeah.
problem is you're also aware of what you need to do. So you're
Yeah.
aware that I could do a meditation practice, I could go to a spiritual class, I could do that. And when you do that, for a brief moment, you feel that transcendental bliss. You're able, but you're not able to sustain it. Right.
Yeah.
So as soon as you leave that, 30 minutes later, you're back down into normal, into the hustle and bustle. So Ekagra is an aware state where you're aware that something higher and more beautiful exists. You're just unable to sustain that with your practices. Okay. Then the third state is called, I think, Vikshipta. Vikshipta is where you're able to sustain this for a prolonged period of time, which means that you could do an hour's meditation in the morning, and that meditation could keep you in a state of bliss for the entire day, maybe even a couple of days. Now, a lot of times you find athletes and musicians are in this, where they live their practice so much that their practice keeps them in a state of bliss for a prolonged period of time. And then the third state is called Niruddha. Niruddha is where you are so powerful that you change your environment. You
Wow.
know, that when you walk into an environment, you change everything. And we see this and we hear stories of this in spirituality where a saint walks in and everything changes around there. And in some shape and form, you can even see this with certain enlightened souls, even in our being, someone like a pope or someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama or certain masters. I would say, you imagine you walk into a party and you said to yourself, let me give you an example, is you said to yourself, I'm going to this party and I'm not going to consume any alcohol at all. You said, you know what, I'm on a detox. So you go in and there are the first 2 states mean as soon as you walk into that party, someone gives you a drink, you'll take it. First 2 states. The third state is you go, someone offers you a drink and you said, no, I'm not doing anything. But if you stay there for another 2 hours, you'll hold a drink and you'll get it,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
fourth state is you go in there and you said, hey, I'm not going to consume any alcohol. And for the duration, no matter how long you're there, you're able to enjoy everything, but abstain from what it is. You're able to do that. The environment doesn't change, but you are able to rise above and sustain that for a prolonged period of time. And then the first state is something magical. So in that environment or in that party, if I drop or inject someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, everyone who's holding a drink will put it down.
Put it down.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. They change the environment. That is an enlightened state of being. Right? So now coming back to your question, how do you get there? Well, the first thing is if you're in the first three states, your environment has to change. You have to start situating and surrounding yourself with like-minded, like-hearted people who live in alignment with the values and the behaviors you want to. In the Hare Krishna temple, we used to always say, take the association of enlightened devotees. People who are already enlightened, people who are living that path. You take their association, you mimic that behavior in some shape and form that governs it. So the easiest place to start is to re-look at your ecosystem in some shape or form. Re-look at all of the people around you. How many people are living the life you would like to live in that way? So the first thing you need to do is change these people. And that requires courage, that requires strength, and that in some shape and form is an adversity that you're going to have to overcome, right, to become who you want to. That's the beautiful thing about life, is that everything is very fluid and dynamic, and this is the dance between who you want to be, what you need to do, and it ebbs and flows on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I have a analogy I want to bring here, Shamal. When you talk about sports, you're so focused on it. Like if it's archery, I'm so focused on it. I know that, here's the, echelons of growth that I'm looking for. There's solo practice. My environment is very controlled. But when I actually go out there for my actual shoots, which is a competition, that environment is very different. There's noise, there's loudness, there's, movement. It's very different from my practice environment. Now that's sports. Life is very different from that
Yeah.
ecosystem itself. How does one sort of lift some of these to see, I'm ready for the life ups and downs, as against a very, structured way of looking at it is, okay, these kind of changes, here's how I practice my mind, psychologically as well as physiologically, I prepare myself, versus in life it's coming from all angles.
Yeah, well, great analogy with sport. The first thing is if you practice in a hygienic environment where everything is completely sanitized, you got perfect equipment, perfect environment, no disturbances, you will not win in competition. There's zero chance, because with every variable that comes in, it draws from your cognitive and mental load to be able to keep those distractions aside. So for you to be able to win in an environment that has a lot of noise, is a different country, different competitors, all of that, you'll have to start interjecting each of these variables into your practice environment, so you teach your mind how to remain laser focused in the midst of that environment. Exact same thing with life as well. You could keep doing meditation in a very sterile environment in your home with beautiful candles and music and everything. And as soon as you walk out your house, you will be troubled by the first thing that happens to you, unless you learn to bring those variables into your meditation and teach your mind how to cut through it in every shape and form. The other interesting analogy is that you use archery as an example, right? So if you are standing there as an archer, pulling your arrow back and looking, if you're looking at the entire target, all three colors in there, right, the probability of you hitting it is very low. Of you
Yeah.
hitting a bullseye is probably zero. Of hitting
Yeah.
that target is also low, right? But as you start distilling your focus down, if you really want to hit the bullseye, you've got to be focusing on the center of the bullseye for you to stand any chance of doing that. That's what looking like a sniper and doing that is. You take that analogy into life. Most people don't know what they're looking at. That's why they don't hit anything, right? So when I ask someone, what are you trying to get to, right? Nobody can even answer this question. They can give me an answer like, oh, I want to earn $10 million, or I want to become the CEO of it. But that's it. It stops there. When you start distilling it down and down and down, they have absolutely zero clarity about what they're aiming at, what are the hurdles in between getting there, and what is required for them to actually get there. They don't have that level of clarity. And clarity is really the pin in the ground that everyone needs to be looking at.
Mm.
Without clarity, the mind and body cannot align to help it matter.
Mm.
So most people, you're like, okay, great. I want to earn $10 million. Fantastic. Can you please name me 5 things that you think you're going to face on the path of that? No one has a clue. They'll give you some ideas of what they think it is. They'll say, oh, maybe my Instagram channel won't grow as quickly as I want to, or this person may not. Like for you, for example, if I asked you, how are you going to get to 1,000 podcast episodes? What are the challenges? You're going to say, oh, a few people don't respond to it in time. Maybe my production company. That's scratching the surface. You've not even thought about it clearly.
Yeah.
So if you've
Yeah.
not thought about it, anything that comes in your way will completely derail you from this process. That's fundamentally what it is. So how do you find clarity? You find clarity by asking a few questions. First clarity is, what do I need to do? Write it down. What is it that I'm actually doing? So I'm creating a podcast channel. Great. Okay. What is podcast? So you can also say, what is it? Video only? Is it audio only? What? The question is, where am I doing it? Am I doing it in person, or am I doing it or online? Where? How am I doing it? Am I doing it once a week, once a day, 2 times a day, once a month? How? What is it? How? Okay. When am I doing it? Am I having a set time? I'm doing it in this 1 month, or am I doing it every single day? These are the easy 4 questions: what, where, when, how. The why is the critical one. So why am I doing it? So the first thing you say, I'm tired of my old life. I wanted to do something different, carve a different path. Okay, great. Next, why? Why are you tired of your old life? Because I didn't recognize who I was. I wasn't making enough money. Okay, why do you want to make more money? I want to make more money because it gives me a sense of freedom. Okay, why do you want more freedom? I want more freedom because, I want to be able to spend more time with my kids and my loved ones. I want to be able to travel and stuff. Why do you want to spend more time with your loved ones, and why do you want to travel a little bit more? Because that will make me happy, and that will make me blissful, and that when I feel I'll be truly who I want to. Fantastic. 5 whys gives you clarity with why you need to transcend every single adversity that you face, right? If I stopped at the first why is, why are you doing this? And you're saying, I want 1,000 episodes, then, as soon as you get the first bit of adversity, as soon as you get 10 people who don't respond to an email, you'll stop, right?
Yeah.
But when you understand that, listen, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because this is my path to financial freedom and having time to spend with my loved ones. All of a sudden, those 10 no's don't matter. Because those 10 no's are far smaller in light of this here. So how do you find clarity? You ask the what, the where, the when, the how, and you ask why 5 times.
Wow.
And you really spend time with this. When you get this here, everything else falls in place.
What you're also talking about through this clarity or this quest for clarity is you become a lot more aware as to why you're doing this. I remember when I started podcasting, I reached out a whole bunch of folks who were in the podcasting space to see if anybody could mentor me or coach me, because I didn't come from this line at all. And one of the mentors I got, he said people last for only 3 episodes, and beyond that they sort of give up. So why are you doing this? So I could totally resonate with this, but it becomes an important exercise of awareness to derive clarity as to why you're doing this. And that awareness is what you're saying starts with this when, why, how, what, and the 5 whys. Have I got that right,
Yeah.
or have I missed some bit of it?
Well, awareness and clarity will come together. Like I said, anyone who thinks they have any awareness, the longer you spend time asking questions, that level of clarity gets deeper, and you're able to sort of peel away more levels. Also, the interesting thing is the why may change. So it's important to ask this question periodically, maybe every 6 months or every year, because in that year you've grown. 50 episodes later, you've learned a lot, and you may have got some pearls of wisdom from some people who may change your course of action or question why you're doing this. So it's important to periodically keep reflecting on the why, because the why can change and there's nothing wrong if it changes. That's the other problem that most people have, is that they seem to get stuck to a certain type of identity and a certain thing. So, for example, you do a podcast and you got to 50 episodes, right? Now, at 50 episodes, you're a completely different person to when you started at episode number one, right?
Yeah.
And at episode number one, maybe your goal was to get to the first 100 or 150. But at 50, you learn something about you. And it's okay to then say, hey, listen, I don't feel as connected to this, and it's okay to step away, right?
Yeah.
What's worse is to say, I commit to this, I'm going to stay all the way to the end. The thing is to be fluid and dynamic with it. As long as it's centered with the heart, that's the most important thing. See, fear should never prevent you from starting anything. So that is the adversity you want to cross. If there's fear for starting or fear for executing, you want to sort of transcend that. But if there's clarity for stopping, that's perfectly okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I have a follow through question here, Shamil. When we talk about going back every 6 months or whatever is the duration to go back and look at it, in the corporate world, one of the things I have learned is if you don't measure it, you don't really know how you're progressing. In some ways, you're also talking about applying that philosophy to your own life. And you're not talking about
Yeah.
really, these are very hard to measure because, like how you talked about, it's a spiral growth. It's hard to see how you've grown, but it's when you reflect on it on a periodical basis, you start seeing how you've transformed. Is this really working? Is this changing? You start seeing that. But the most important thing I understand here is it's important to go back to see, have you measured this? How's it progressing? Have I got that right? Or
Yeah, you should be measuring everything. And a lot of people tell me certain things can't be measured, and that's not true. I find that everything can be measured. Every single thing, you can find a way to measure it. And to give you an example, one of the things that I do before I even work with any athletes is people come to me and they say, hey, can you coach me or work with me, even a corporate athlete? I'm saying, fine. So I ask them, I want you to create a list and send it to me over WhatsApp or email of everything that you want to achieve in a week from Monday to Friday. Just send me a list, right? I don't care how many things are on the list, just send it to me. And then I'll write to them on Friday and I ask them, okay, on this list that you sent me, how many of these did you actually accomplish, right? Then they'll tick it off. And I say, okay, now just quickly scan through this. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most important and 1 being the least important, just give a number to each of these. So I'm now looking at the percentage of things they completed, and I'm then looking at the weightage of importance with the things that they did complete. And I will get a percentage out of this here. Right? If the percentage is less than 80%, I don't work with those people at all, because the way I work is I'm working remotely most of the time. I'm never with you all the time. And if you cannot stay committed to something you want to do, the probability of you staying committed to something I want to do is drastically low.
very
So I don't. So this is a very simple exercise that I created for myself to measure commitment from a person. So every single thing. So when you ask someone, how do you measure commitment? They say there's no metric to measure it, but you can engineer your own metric for how to measure anything in life.
yeah. You spoke about, and in the same lines, when you're talking about this, I remember, I think it's either a podcast or a talk that you gave where you talk about the cost of failure um, in this process, right? Because as you're going through your awareness and you're going through um, pivoting, making that change, bringing in consistency or a regulated way of doing this repeatedly or creating habits, there's also a cost of failure associated with this, isn't it? How does
Yeah,
one
of course.
move through that?
Everything has a cost of failure. The cost of failure is something that most people cannot measure. They find it very, very difficult to measure. So the reason I talk about the cost of failure, firstly, everything has a penalty. Also call it a penalty for failure, right? When you look at life, there is in the game of sport, for example, there's a penalty for every failure. You overstep on the front foot when you're bowling cricket, it's a no ball, 1 run. You know, you hit the ball in the water, it's a one stroke penalty. You know, in golf, everything has a penalty for every mistake you make. Now, if you bring that penalty into practice, you teach the brain how to respect that penalty. In life, there are also penalties for failures, right? But we don't think about it in that shape and form. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you said to yourself, hey, listen, I want to finish my work at 5 o'clock every single day, so I spend time with my child. And 1 month goes into two goes into three. Some days you finish at 6, some days you finish at 7, 8:30, whatever it is. You're not able to quantify the penalty of you not sticking to that, but there is a penalty. The penalty is that every minute that you default, you are starting to you spending less time with your child. Now, statistically, a parent spends 90% of their time with their child from 0 to 18. The rest of the 10% is from 18 till the time they die. You know, so this is a statistical thing. So what is the penalty or the cost of that failure that you've set is that you're not able to see it, but you are losing critical time, because 1 minute in the first 18 years it doesn't have the same impact as 1 minute in the second 75 years.
Wow.
So this is the penalty. So what I'm saying is that everything has a cost. Every failure has a cost. There is a ramification to everything. The mind just doesn't see it, and we're not engineered to see it in that way, but you have to look at it. It's called looking from gestalt to granular. Gestalt is big picture, granular is the micro details in it. And this is the danger with living a life where others determine what your metrics for success are. If you are working in terms of this is how much I'm going to earn, or this is the benchmark or the top line we need to hit this quarter, and that is your be all and end all, then you lose track of the penalties or the costs of failures in every other aspect of your life. Now, it's very, very difficult to put the magnifying glass on every single aspect, but it's important for you to balance both. Have a metric for work and what you want to do there, but also have a metric for life and understand the penalty for failure in this aspect here. And then integrate into your life something that reminds you of this penalty every single time. Yesterday,
Yeah.
I gave a lecture on fear and stress, and I was telling people managing stress is a lifestyle. It's not a hack. Winning is a lifestyle. It's not a hack. You can't just show up and win. You can't just think that I will not do anything, and when I'm faced with a stressful situation, I'll rise above it. No, that will not happen. You have to build habits that give you the toolkit to manage all of these situations.
I want to come to the tools part of it, but even before that, I have a few more questions on um, the cost of failure. When you talk about sports, you know, as a sports person, you already have a purpose. You start with a purpose. You have a vision of what is your larger purpose. And the cost of failure, I remember listening to one of your conversations where you talk about, like in athletics, for example, the difference between the first and the second is just a few milliseconds or a second. That's it.
Hmm.
And so it becomes very obvious as to what the cost of failure is over there. But when it comes to life, there are certain failures that are learning processes, but there are certain failures that have a huge cost associated with it. How do you differentiate between what kind of failures do you really need to measure and regulate yourself towards get into a habit of self-regulation versus what are things that you look at as a learning process?
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult question to answer because it's fluid and dynamic for every single person. There's no formula, and you can't be looking for a formula that you're going to apply to everything and apply to it, because who you were at the start of this conversation is completely different to who you are going to be at the end of it. And what is important before may be completely different to what's important at the end of it. So you have to constantly bring a level of awareness and mindfulness to your life to determine what I'm prepared to let go of versus what I'm not prepared to let go of. For example, to a person starting off their career, closing every single deal may be the most important thing. But to a person who is 40 years old and a mom, all of a sudden closing a deal for $10,000 is not as important as 30 minutes more with their child. You understand?
Mm.
So it's fluid and dynamic, and you have to bring that level of awareness to every single thing to determine what is important. And if you're not prepared to ask yourself, what is important to me, right, and make decisions in alignment with that, then others will make that decision for you. But
Yeah.
more importantly, what you need to also understand is that every decision has a repercussion and a ramification. Because what is important to you may not necessarily be the thing that's important to someone else. So, for example, if your boss says, I need you to close this top line of $1 million in this quarter, that is his thing. And he said that, and he's going to hold you accountable to that. And someone's holding him accountable to that. So that may be the most important thing for him. For you, it may be something else. Your parent may have got a heart attack, and you being there is very, very important. Now, they are not going to align their value and what is important to them to what is important to you. You have to make a decision, and there's certain repercussions to the decision you take. If you decide, I want to go and spend time with my parent for the next 3 months and I can't do this, you're going to get fired. And if you decide that I want to meet this top line, you may lose your parent and regret that for the both of these things. That's the dance of life. That's the beautiful thing. You will be faced with a fork in the road every single day. Making the decision is the first part of it. Living with the consequences of your decision is also the second more important part. And and there's something I love to say. We learned this in spirituality, that these forks in the road are life challenges that you'll face, things that happen in what we call the materialistic world, the world around us. That's how we refer to it in spirituality. We tell people that something has to break in the material world for you to get a breakthrough in the spiritual world, which means the mind has to shatter for the heart to break through.
Wow.
you know so remember this is very, very critical. Every time you have a pivotal moment in your life that tests you physically, could be through illness, could be through pain, whatever is happening in the physical world is creating a breakthrough in the spiritual world, because you're going to come out with a deeper level of enlightenment and awareness that's going to bring you closer in alignment with your core values and keep you there.
I think through this conversation, if if I could sort of bring it together, I think what you start off with is an awareness and then a gratitude for your journey so far. And from that comes the whole process of understanding what's really important as a priority for you. And then comes the self regulation bit, if I got this right, which is where you measure the failure, the cost of failure, the consequences as a result of not paying heed to the priority that I've given. This is a long process when life is still going on and we're living in a world which is like, really running at a speed of a bullet train. How does one balance the two?
Everything's a journey. Everything's going to take long. If you're looking for a shortcut, there is no shortcut. I don't believe, uh, I said, you won't believe the amount of industries that are $1 trillion industries that are built on someone's need for instant gratification and instant reward and instant this thing. For example, I said, everyone goes to a gym. Here's an interesting piece of information. If you look at the floor plate, you go into anything, you go into a restaurant, the restaurant will tell you, we can only seat 50 people here. How did it come to that? It measured the square foot of that space, right, in relation to the tables, in relation to safely exiting people, and it came up with this number of 50, because only 50 people can physically fit in that space. A gym would have the exact same space, but they would take 1,500 memberships. Now, they don't know that 1,500 people are going to come and what time they're going to come, because they never ask you what time you're going to come, right? But they're relying on the fact that only 2% of those 1,500 will ever show up,
Yeah.
right? Because why? Most people want short hacks. Consistently over a period of time, very few people are going to stay committed and consistent with that. So
Yeah.
if you're looking for a short hack, you are going to be the victim of many people who are going to sell you many fads in life. Right. If you look at everything as a long journey of commitment and consistent, I run a beautiful tribe. It's called Inside the Locker Room. And it's based on the philosophy of a locker room. And we have a beautiful community. We do monthly challenges, we do everything. But the premise of that community is consistency is the breakfast of champions. It's not about doing massive things. It's about doing tiny things every single day. And we hold each other accountable to small things. Sometimes that small thing is literally doing just 3 minutes of breath work every single morning, or taking 30 seconds in the night to practice gratitude, or pausing in the middle of the day to just say thank you to someone. It's as tiny as that, but we hold each other accountable to that one practice for more than 100 days at a time, right? Because if we just do that one thing, that tiny little thing that takes 30 seconds for 100 days, you're a completely different human being, because the ramifications from this spill over into every other aspect of your life. So that's what we do with inside the locker room, and that's what everyone needs to do, is understand that consistency is the breakfast of champions.
So, is that what differentiates a champion from an aspiring one in sports?
Yeah. Yes, 100%. Champions are people who just repeat the same process over and over and over and over and over again. Champions do the basics the best. Champions master the basics. And in sport, we have a beautiful saying. We say amateurs practice till they get it right, professionals practice till they can't get it wrong. And we see this. I see this everywhere. I go to a golf course. I work with amateurs. I work with pros. Every single amateur I work with will hit one ball better than a pro would. Every single one of them would hit one ball by sheer luck. You ask him to hit that shot again, he can't do it, right? But he can only hit one shot. So once he hit one, he's super happy, right? The pro is the guy who wants to hit 10 and get 9 to land in exactly the same place. He can't get wrong. He knows exactly every single thing to repeat that process. Mastery is a lifelong journey. That's the beauty of mastery, is that it takes an entire life to sort of do this. The greatest podcasters on the planet have been doing it for an entire life.
Yeah.
They see everything through the lens of that camera. The greatest photographers are people who've dedicated their whole life to that. The greatest artists are people who dedicated their whole life. When you dedicate so much of yourself to a certain skill and art, you only see the world through that skill and art. It's like a monk. You may not understand this through the lens of an artist or a musician, but think of it through a lens of a monk who meditates every single day. The first thing is, like, I was in the Hare Krishna temple. We chant every day 16 rounds of 108 malas. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. That doesn't change. From the day we enter to the day we leave, which could be 70, 80 years for some people, the shloka is exactly the same. So we're not looking to change it. Most people, oh, today I want to chant Om Mani Padme Hum. Next day you want to chant this. They keep changing it. No, you stick to the process. It's simple. We chant 16 rounds as well. Exactly the same process every single day, every single day. What does that do in you? In any spiritual person who lived in a temple or any monk, it cultivates a love and a kindness. After time, you only see everything as love and kindness, right? You're unable to see everything else. So that is what mastery is. Mastery is merging your mind with your practice, so that the essence of that practice allows you to see the world differently.
I have more one more question around this, Shamal. Do you play on your strengths there? Or do you master your strengths, or do you work on some of your weaknesses as well in this process to master
In,
that
in,
bit as well?
yeah. You see, strengths and weaknesses are very fluid and dynamic as well. And the penalties for each of these and the benefits of each of these differently weigh out. For example, if I take a fast cricketer, a batsman, let's assume his weakness is facing bouncers from fast bowlers. He has to work on that weakness, because why? That weakness could kill him, right? But in podcasting, let's assume your weakness is post production. I don't know how to do any post production. You can easily outsource that and someone else can do that. So, assessing what is the cost of, or the time cost of learning a weakness versus doubling down on a strength versus the actual cost of a weakness coming into your life, can has to be assessed in every single environment independently and differently. That's so in sport, yes, we spend a lot of time trying to just raise the bar on our weaknesses as well, to the point where it may not necessarily become a strength, but we become significantly more competent in it, that it doesn't remove us from that game or remove us from that situation. In business, you have the beautiful ability to just layer in people who have complementary strengths. And that's the beautiful thing about business. So if you're looking at it from a business lens, I would say double down on your strengths, do much more of this, and circumnavigate yourself with people who can take care of those weaknesses. Okay, but if you're looking at a physical thing like sport, where you want to run a marathon, then you have to look at those areas of weaknesses and you have to get them up to a level of competency, because the penalty for that weakness could be life and death.
Yeah, yeah. And Shamal, in the same lines, one of the questions I had was around, um, how do you go about managing the deflections that happen with the mind? See, all of these are more physiological changes that we're talking about. But as you're going through this, the mind plays a different game. It's like it's constantly talking to you about, oh my God, you sucked in this. Oh my God, you could have done it this way. There's this constant verbatim that's going on in your head. How do you sort of break that glass ceiling that you put for yourself? Um,
So you have to train. The mind is a muscle like anything else. You have to train it. You have to train it to bounce back from that. You have to train it to cut through the distraction, cut through the noise. One of the ways of doing it is by surrounding yourself in an ecosystem of people. The reason why athletes are always thriving and always shattering and breaking their old performances and setting new barriers is because they're surrounded by a group of like-minded, like-hearted people that create psychological safety and encourage them to push. We don't talk about our failures. We're just encouraging them to push and push and push in whatever shape and in a safe way. And we can talk about it. And those weaknesses and those failures are very, very public in that small ecosystem called the locker room. Most people don't have that. Most people are scared of failing in public, and they're scared of talking about their failures. So as a result, they've isolated any of those failures from anyone being able to give them safe guidance around it. So you've injected yourself in a bubble, and then you're looking to grow in that bubble where the only voice is your own voice in there. So the first thing is, surround yourself with people you like and people you trust, because those people you like and trust can create psychological safety for you to speak about the things you're challenging, and then they'll give you a level of support, and that level of motivation will get you to the next level. It'll get you to that next level. Initially, that motivation will keep getting you to be consistent. And there'll come a day when, even if that motivation disappears, the discipline that you bring to your life every day will help you continue to go even further. So that's what we say in sport. We say, when motivation ends, discipline must take over. Okay, very, very important thing. We keep using this over and over again, and that's what needs to happen. So how do you silence the voice? You silence the voice by surrounding yourself with people who can provide, people you feel safe talking to and being vulnerable with, and people who can give you positive feedback, but also training the mind and training the muscle how to bounce back from that each time.
And is it important to have a coach in this process, or is this more like a self, um, led
No,
journey?
a coach is important for everything. You've had a teacher your whole life. In every aspect of your life, someone taught you. You want to learn a new language, someone taught you. You want to learn math, someone taught you. You want to learn podcasting, someone taught you. Why is it that you think you're going to manage the biggest challenge of your life, which is life itself, on your own? That's the problem. And sometimes having an external perspective to things is very, very important. Having a coach is critically important in helping you stay aligned with this journey, and knowing how to find the right coach is even more important.
That's a little challenging as well, right? What are some key things one would look for in a coach? Like, I've had some really wonderful coaches, and it's been life changing when you get a great coach, because they make you think, they change the perspective, they ask you the fundamental questions. It's not like they're telling you go do this way. It's the questions, it's the conversations, it's that safety net that they've built where you can go and talk about things?
Yeah, there are a few things. The first thing is that the area that you want to get coached in, the person you approach has to be competent in that area. So, for example, if you're looking for a spiritual coach, he should be spiritually inclined and have a certain practice and has studied that art. So there's a level of competency in the skill set you're looking to be coached in. For example, you can't go to someone from Wall Street and ask him to teach you your spiritual thing if he doesn't have that aspect inclined to him. He'd be a great financial coach maybe. And similarly, you can't go to the monk and ask me, get me a great financial advisor there. They don't even have bank accounts. So first thing is competence in that area. The second aspect is there needs to be a level of comfort between you and him. You need to be able to speak about anything you want to with respect to that pillar that you want to be coached in. The third is he needs to instill confidence in you at all times. He needs to make you feel confident to constantly move forward all of the time. Okay. The fourth one is he needs to help you find clarity with respect to what you need to do, and then the confidence to execute it. The fifth one is he needs to have character. Character means he needs to put your best interests over and above his best interests at all times. Okay. If any one of these are missing here, is the wrong coach.
Got it. Got it. And were you lucky to have some really wonderful coaches in your journey?
Yeah, I've had some phenomenal coaches. I've phenomenal coaches. I've had phenomenal spiritual masters. And like I told you, I'm lucky because I grew up in a family that was so spiritually inclined that the core values of spirituality were deeply ingrained in every single thing that we did. My grandfather used to preach the scriptures. He knew the scriptures at the tip of his fingers. He was literally the spiritual pillar in our entire community, which had 20, 30,000 people. He would preach 5 days a week in different temples. Everyone would come over. So he was there. My parents also, up to today, are the pillars of the temples that we go. They take care of everything. I was blessed to have many spiritual masters come and live in our home. And then at 18 years old, I found my spiritual master who got a great relationship with me. And for 20 years, I traveled with him, worked with him, saw him around the world. He would jump on calls with me. He opened my world to so many others. And from a coaching standpoint, I have worked with some of the best sporting coaches in the world. So even though they were not uh, technically my coach, we worked together in an ecosystem of nurturing others that I was able to learn from them, absorb from them, add to them, and see the impact of this.
And I think I'm coming to the last segment of our conversation, which is for someone who's listening to this podcast. And Shamal, I normally have anyone between the age group of 25 to 45. I have outliers who are as young as 11 as well, coming and listening to the long format podcast, which surprises me sometimes. But I think there's a left shift that's happening out there in terms of just discovering yourself, wanting to understand who you are, and
Mm.
thereby leading your journey. For someone who's watching this or listening to this, are there tools that we can give away of how to maneuver through self leadership through adversity, of maneuvering through adversity and being a self leader for yourself?
I think, firstly, you should recognize that every decade from 20 onwards presents a new life challenge, and you'll have a new evolutionary growth in some shape and form. So you'll go through a challenge in your 20s, you'll go through a different challenge in your 30s, different challenge in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on. Every decade will present a new growth challenge in some shape and form. That's perfectly normal. What you want to do if you very, very young or whenever you are is start finding a practice that becomes really the center of who you are. The practice I would recommend for most people is a practice of solitude. So, either taking, and what can start off with 5 minutes should eventually evolve into 45 minutes, an hour, a day, even longer if you can. Why? Because in solitude, you really discover the essence of everything, the meaning of everything. And solitude helps you find comfort in minimalism. It helps you push things off the table, whereas the noise makes you feel creates FOMO, and you want to bring more things on the table. So the essence of life is to try to get more off your table so that you can give more mindfulness to the things that remain on there that you've determined are important. Solitude as a practice makes you comfortable with just letting go. So I tell people, start with as little as 5 minutes, just sitting by yourself. It could be a breath work, it could be a meditation, but it could just be going for a walk without anything, right? But that 5 minutes can't be happening for the rest of your life. It needs to start increasing. It needs to go 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 10, because every minute you start increasing brings a different level of awareness and depth. It allows you to play with a different thought. So that's the first thing. The second practice is the practice of writing and the practice of journaling. It's very important for you to assimilate those thoughts in one place, integrate those thoughts, and create a document that you can reflect on and reference at various points in time to see, okay, this is where I was at this stage, this is where I am now, this is this incident, that is that incident, and be able to sort of sequentially put it all together in some shape and form.
One of the things you talk about, and I found it fascinating, and that's one of the reasons I reached out, was the holistic approach to change. um, when I used to lead change management in organizations, it's more, the vision, the goal, methodologies and tools and frameworks. But there's another side to it that I've come to understand. Change cannot be done in silo with just that. There is a mind, there is a body, there is a social you, there is an inner you, there's a big picture thinking. There's quite a few things that come together to make it holistic. And you talk about that extensively. Can you talk about the correlation between the mind and the body? You talked about the brain to the heart in the beginning, and I think that's
Mhm.
where you were inferring as well, about the correlation. I'd like you to talk a little more about this. What's a
So,
holistic approach?
the holistic approach looks at every single aspect of life. And I think the best way to explain it to people is, if you Google this, you'll also see this is very well researched and documented, is we have different bodies. And the body you see right now is a very physical body. Outside of that is a mental body. Outside of that is emotional body. And outside of that is an energy or an aura body. So we've got four of these bodies that represent four different layers of energy around us. So, for example, when you get a disease that manifests on your physical body, that disease has had to transcend everything. It's already impacted your spiritual energy. It's already impacted your emotional energy. It's already impacted and penetrated through your mental energy and then transcended on your physical energy. So healing in itself has to reverse all the way, which means you can't heal a disease only in the body. You have to heal the disease in the mind. You have to let go of the emotion around that disease, and you have to give it a chance to heal that energy and the spirituality around that. Which is why I'm saying every single incident that we reflect on, how we reflect on the emotions and the transitions of it, plays a very, very interesting approach to our holistic approach to life. So, for example, when I talk about the anger that I had towards the apartheid, now, if I held that anger, and anger is not physical, anger was mental and emotional, if I hang on to that, then that would have eventually translated and penetrated my physical body and manifested in some shape or form in there. We see this. And this was an interesting study done by Dr. Ray Hammer, who founded an aspect of medicine called German New Medicine. And he was the founder of this, where he was an oncologist in Munich that studied 188 cancer patients in his hospital. And he asked them at the moment of diagnosis, through an interview process, how many of you had life changing traumas within 6 months to a year of your diagnosis? And all of them had that. And what he started to do was he started to map the type of trauma through brain imaging to aspects of the brain, and then he connected those aspects of the brain to areas of the body and was able to connect the dots between emotion, brain activity, and the physical body, and he drew this entire link. Now, what he did, they may have been 1950s or 1960s, what he did was been known by spiritualists for the very, very long period of time. Okay, so this is the deep connectivity between the mind, the emotion, the body, and our energy as such. And when you start to understand and look at everything as this fluid and dynamic relationship that happens, you start to be a little more mindful of the decisions you make and the emotions you have and the impact and the ramifications of every single thing. You will be able to understand that if I'm feeling anger towards a situation, it's in my best interest that I transition it towards a space of acceptance or a space of gratitude very, very quickly. Because, the Buddhists say this, that, most people, uh, anger is like holding a hot stone, waiting to throw it, not realizing you getting burnt in the process. It's a very, very beautiful Buddhist explanation and philosophy of what it is. What are they trying to tell us right here? That they're trying to say that that physical, emotional energy of anger has an effect on the physical body that you're unable to see. That's what they're trying to explain to us, and that's what that holistic approach to everything is to understand and evaluate the transience of your mind every single day. And as this process of self leadership and self discovery evolves, the one thing you learn is you learn how to give your best to your ecosystem around you. And Viktor Frankl says this very beautifully in Man's Search for Meaning. He says it's through self transcendence that we actually self actualize,
Yeah.
which means that you truly discover yourself by giving the best of yourself to everyone else.
Yeah.
And that is probably the pinnacle of self mastery or self leadership.
As we come to the end of this conversation, and honestly, I found this very profound, not just in terms of the concepts and the philosophy behind it, but I also think it was very introspective and reflective of my own journey. And most of my questions in this were coming from that space of, either some challenges I faced as I was going through this, I wish someone told me, or like,
Yeah.
what potentially is coming my way. Are there things we missed out in this conversation when we talk about self leadership in adversity, um, that we must address?
No, I think we've covered a hell of a lot, but I think what's important is a lot of it was a little bit of theory. To ground it into sort of practical aspects, it's everyone's cultivating a relationship with yourself through a solitude practice, cultivating the practice of journaling, also really sitting with that question of how you would like to be remembered, or how would you like your loved ones to describe you to people they love, which is very, very important. I think if you're going to take anything from here, take the importance of discovering your core values. Take the importance of asking the 5 whys to find clarity. Finding ways and carving space to practice solitude, and then trusting that that solitude will help you decompress and decompartmentalize the noise in your life so that you can find more minimalism in there. And then the process of documenting and reflecting on this journey through some way, some process.
No, I love this. I love this. Before we part, what does attitude makeover mean to you?
And attitude makeover is, it's a shift in mindset for me. And I said in the call, mindset is everything. An attitude makeover is maybe a reflection on what was the current attitude which I was bringing to life, and how has it served me, and what is going to be a 101 reset of that to get to the next phase in my life. An attitude makeover is also a journey and not a destination. So, how am I going to hit that reset button once every decade to re-look at that next phase of my life?
Thank you so much, Shamil. This
Thank
was
you
a
very much.
lovely conversation. Hopefully, we'll connect again and we'll have a follow through as well. And thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thank you very,
Uh,
very much. Wish you all everything of the best.